Hello, welcome to another episode of the Chrissie Mayr podcast. We are on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud. And if you're listening to us on iTunes right now, go ahead and leave a review with the most amount of stars you can leave. We appreciate all the reviews you guys have left so far. Quick shout out to a couple of our sponsors. Stand Alone is a new Substack by Melissa McCutcheon, an artist and former professor who actually quit due to the corruption of academia. She publishes at least once a week on topics designed to offer some hope and insight into the bizarre groupthink world we're currently living in. You can subscribe at http://standalone.substack.com. It's free, and there are some really valuable bits of information on there regarding individual empowerment and ways to stay true to your principles in the face of adversity. In fact, she just published a piece about the wave of resignations we're seeing in response to the jab mandates for companies with 100 plus employees, and she weaves in the story of her own decision to leave academia. So go ahead, subscribe to standalone.substack.com. Check it out, guys. Very interesting stuff. I always love talking to people who were like former professors and such. It's nice to get the inside scoop. Another shout out to our sponsor, Drom.com. We all know dating apps are terrible. Again, it's November. Winter is coming. It's time to find your boo that you are going to spend the winter with. You know what I mean? It's just not only do they have to have a generator and maybe some food and some, you know what I mean? The food that you break into. What's it called? The Patriot Supply. But they have to have the same values as you. The solution, I think, to a lot of these horrible dating apps are values-based matching. If you're conservative, things probably aren't going to work out with someone who's a total lefty. Same with religion, lifestyle, how to raise your kids, and other core values. Sure, somebody could change to meet you where you are, but why not find the perfect match from the start? Drome is a free, keyword free, new values-based dating app. You pick your deal breakers and deal makers. You don't have to addictively check the app. There's no experts or anything like that. And it's also video only for more human interaction. So go to Drom.Date/CMP in your phone's browser, click the iOS or Google button to install, and use the invite code CMP to sign up. If you're already matched up, tell your friends. That's Drom.Date/CMP. Design and meet your perfect match. It's free to use. Why not, guys? Shout out to my New Jersey people. I'm going to be doing comedy this Saturday at the Dojo of Comedy in Morris Plains, New Jersey, also known as Tiff's Ale House. That's this Saturday, November 6th. One show at 9 o'clock. Get tickets on my website, ChrissieMayr.com. Also, I'm going to be back in Dallas at Hyenas December 15th and 16th with Aaron Berg. Tickets will be available soon, and then I'll be in Albany next year doing a show on Long Island, so doing lots more dates. I think I also am getting something lined up for Savannah and Tampa. I'm going to be all over, guys, performing all the places where they're not mandating injections. How exciting. I'm so excited to have this guy on the podcast today. He's really more than a triple threat. He's highly decorated. He is the author of Enough Already. He's the director of the Libertarian Institute. He is the editorial director of antiwar.com. He's also a radio host. He's really done it all. Scott Horton, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. How was your Halloween?
Oh, it was a lot of fun.
Did you dress up? Did you eat candy?
No, I couldn't find my costume. I was going to be the search for Animal Chin again, but I couldn't find it.
What?
Never mind.
The search for what? No, I want to understand. This seems like a niche joke.
It's a ridiculous old skateboard video from the 1980s. You wouldn't understand.
I might. I mean, I wasn't born then. No, I definitely was.
I bet you'd like it if you saw it now, but if you don't know what I'm talking about, I couldn't explain it.
Now I want to look it up. What is it called?
The Search for Animal Chin.
Animal.
So I was gonna. I had my hat and my beard, but I couldn't find my black.
Oh, is it like a skull? I'm seeing like a skull guy.
Not exactly.
1987.
Old Chinese man. Have you seen him? No.
Okay. All right. No.
Type in. Have you seen him?
Okay. Have you seen him? That's it.
Yeah. I'm sure it'll come up.
Okay. Interesting. It's just bringing up like different crime things. Okay, we're off the rails already.
Chinese guy in a hat? Okay, sorry. See, I told you this was never gonna work.
We just started, and already this interview is off the rails. No, I love it. I love it.
My fault.
Yeah, I've been eating a lot of candy. I went trick or treating. I went as a fully vaccinated person. I just had like a scary mask and then a mask over the mask, and I just thought I was amazed at how many people like really thought that I was telling them that I was fully vaccinated because I had like this necklace on with like the little buggy looking thing. The
Did you
germ
have
was
a
this.
plastic face shield?
No, I just had like a regular blue mask over my scary like monster mask, and like just by people's faces, they were like, "Oh, good for you." I was like, "Ugh," and I was like, if I were to do it again, I would have done like cause of death, you know. Anyway, there's always next year. And I went and I voted today. I got my voting sticker, and yeah, did not have to show ID at all. Just showed up. I could have said I was literally anyone, and they're supposed to check the signatures. They didn't at all. In fact, the lady kind of laughed it off, and she was like, "Oh, we're supposed to verify the signatures, but you know, everyone's signature changes over the years, so haha." And like I went with my boyfriend, we were like, "Aren't you like, how do you guys feel like you don't have to ask for IDs at all?" And they were like, "Yeah, actually, it kind of sucks, but it's New York, so."
Well, it's all volunteer work, you know. You get what you pay for.
Where are you in New York right now?
No, I'm from Austin.
Oh, Austin. Okay. Yeah, I was there a few months back with comedians at the compound doing some shows out there. So, man, are you like in Austin? Are you born and raised there?
Well, I moved here when I was 3 months old, so pretty much, yeah.
Oh, okay. Man,
I know
so
it sucks.
how
They
do
should
you
have just moved here first and
how
let
do
me
you
be a born and raised Texan
yeah,
would be better.
how do you feel like about the direction Austin has been going in, and like I mean, how do you feel about the flood of people that have come through the last couple of years?
Well, you know, I don't just resent change, you know, because things are different, but I do resent all the government intervention in the market. So you have trillions of new dollars being inflated and pumped into the housing market, and you have all of these lockdowns, especially on the coast in the blue states, forcing hundreds of thousands of people to flee, especially from California and New York. And then they're all coming here in huge numbers, and they're just gentrifying the whole city of people who are from here who couldn't possibly afford, you know, all these crazy new prices and everything. So it's not just the poor black people and Mexicans on the east side of town who are being gentrified. Now it's everybody, because all the Californians are moving in, and you know, essentially. But you know, if that was just the scheme of things, then I wouldn't cry about it too much. But the fact that you have all this government intervention behind it, forcing these massive migration patterns in this way is, you know, it is pretty destabilizing to a lot of people. But you know, we're hanging in there.
What do you tell people who just are like still don't believe the depth to which the government is overreaching, and how like our liberties are really like hanging on by a thread? Like, where would you begin if you were talking to somebody who just is in denial, still ordering their Amazon, watching their TV, you know?
Yeah, it depends who I'm talking to, I
Yeah.
guess. You know, I mean, if I'm talking to someone who leans right, I guess I'll start with the IRS and start with the boom bust cycle and start with the threat of the move of the liberal left further to the left to socialism, and the threat that that poses to the country in the long term.
What do you mean
And
the boom bust cycle?
well, okay, so I mean, you remember in 1999 there was the dot-com crash, right?
Mhm.
And then in 2000 it was the housing bubble. In both cases, the stock market went with it. So what happens is, and in fact, so this is really, well, as long as you ask a question that broad, I'll answer it this broad.
Uh-oh.
The
Too broad.
mythology, there's a mythology from the Great Depression that in the 1920s you had wild, laissez-faire, free market capitalism, and due to its greed and excesses, that caused these terrible bubbles that led to the stock market crash of 1929 and the depths of the Great Depression. And then only government intervention could come and save us and create these institutions to try to smooth out that boom and bust. That just free market capitalism can't work. You'd be foolish to
Hmm.
believe that it can. You need this managerial state to control it all. Was the lesson of, you
Right.
know, this is the 7th grade version and the 12th
That's
grade
where I'm at.
and the
Thank you.
graduate school version of history in America now. But here's the thing about it. The Federal Reserve System predated the New Deal by 25 years. It was actually
Wow.
created in the Woodrow Wilson years and helped to inflate for World War I. And there was a crash after World War I. Then they inflated all through what they called, remember, the roaring 1920s, when there
Right.
was massive new industrial expansion and improvements in technology. And in a free market, you would have had downward pressure on prices the whole decade long. Instead, prices held pretty much steady because the government was counterfeiting the money. They were inflating the money supply. And so it looked like everything was stable when things should have been getting cheaper and cheaper. And so then at
Wow.
the very end of the 20s, from 27 through 29, they really increased the money supply as a favor to the British to prop up the British pound. And that's what led to the stock market bubble. And that's what led to the crash. So in other words, it was the government intervention on the monetary side that caused the bubble, that caused the crash.
Okay.
Well, and then the mythology is, well, now the government is here. That doesn't happen anymore, except that it does. It happened in 68 and it happened in 88 and it happened. And when there's a terrible inflation of the 70s and really an induced crash of the early 1980s, late 70s and early 1980s. There's the crash again in 1992 and in 1999 and in 2008. And then when we had our giant crash last year, we were due for one anyway. But what happened was the governors locked the whole country down and forced us into this recession, as they did. And then to make up for that, they inflated the money supply even more. So it's really the Austrian School of Economics. These are the only guys who explain this correctly, that the cause of the crash is not that things start going bad. The cause of the crash is the artificial period of pretended prosperity that comes from the inflation of the money supply. It makes it seem like there's a lot more new wealth in the system. It makes it seem like, you know, some people remember in the Bush years and yeah, especially like in the Bush years, everyone's refinancing their house
Yeah.
and then remodeling the whole thing and all marble countertops and all this stuff,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
That's
Everyone has granite
great.
countertops.
Yeah, so
Couldn't shut up about it.
everybody's acting like they're wealthy, but what's happening is the value of their home is increasing for free. They're not doing anything. Just the value of their home is getting higher and higher in monetary terms because they're inflating the currency and inflating particularly the housing market. And so, in other words, it's the government that causes the artificial height of the boom, and that's what causes the very real crash. So again, the governors locked down the whole society last year. They might as that's essentially a stand-in for raising interest rates through the roof or something, causing the
Whoa.
recession. But then what they do is they lower the interest rates even more, and then they create even more money out of nothing. They increase the money supply by huge measures. It depends on who you ask, but by huge measures last year, especially. And so that means we're in a period of a giant bubble now. So back to your question about how are things in Austin right now? Well, a house that was $300,000 a year ago or a year and a half ago now costs $450,000. You had
Yeah.
the value of a house go up $150,000. Why is that? It's just the debasing of the currency. And again, it's these migration patterns of all these Californians fleeing totalitarianism and coming here instead. And that is, you know, creating, stimulating demand for housing, of course, a lot as well. But think about that essentially just as artificial prosperity for those homeowners, but somebody's going to get left holding the bag, just like what happened in 2008. At some point, reality comes due and we have the crash. And see, at some point, what happens is you have price inflation across the board, as we're seeing now. Go to the grocery store,
Right. Gas,
pump gas,
food,
or yeah,
houses,
everything is
everything.
going up, up, up. So at some point they choke. At some point they go, oh no, you know what? It's getting out of control. Now what do we do? Okay, what we'll try to do is we'll try to prick a tiny hole in the bubble and let it try to inflate and, you know, deflate slowly. But that never works. It always pops. And so that's what's going to happen sometime soon. You know, keep your eye on the federal funds rate. Once the Federal Reserve starts raising interest rates, that means they're panicking that they have inflated too much. And that means there's a massive crash coming. And then people get really hurt too. I mean, if it was the Russians who did this to our economy every 10 years, this is like an attack on our society. This
Right.
is destroys people's businesses. It destroys their families. I mean, the number of suicides and foster care and all of the indicators of societal destabilization all go through the roof during these crash periods, and then during the booms like we're going through now, it's the people who are at the top who feel the boom. The people who suffered the most in the crash are the ones who have the hardest time catching back up again, and they're just getting back on their feet before the next crash comes again. And it's just a completely unfair system. And then here's what I was saying about socialism. Like, if I'm talking to people who lean right, the one major point here is the more our quote unquote capitalist system operates this way, the more people move to socialism. The more people think this system is so bad. Well, what's the opposite of this? If this is capitalism, we must be the leftists then, and it must be communism that we want or socialism that we want, because this isn't working out for people. And they're right in the sense that people are blowing their brains out, right? Over their company's gone and their town is gone and they can't afford health care for their spouse and everything goes completely to hell. So, but it isn't the free marketness that's wrong. It's just like the myth of the 1920s. It's not the laissez-faire aspect of the capitalism that causes the crisis. It's the government intervention and rigging the price of money, essentially, that leads to the distortions that lead to the corrections. And so, but then you do have, look at the liberal left, right? The left half of the American political spectrum, are they Hillary Clinton's or are they Bernie Sanders, right? They're moving more and more to Bernie Sanders. They're moving more and more to Bernie Sanders. And Hillary's horrible, by the way, but I'm just saying she represents the capitalist right in the Democratic
Party. She was very hot and trendy
you know.
for a minute. Yeah.
Yeah. But she's Goldman Sachs lady. Nobody thinks that she's really a socialist or a leftist in that sense. But I'm just saying it makes, and because of the corruption of people like her, because she's Goldman Sachs, sock puppet politician, that discredits the whole system. And unfortunately, where it should be leading more people to libertarianism, to understand what's the real root of all of this is the government intervention in the market in the first place. Unfortunately, it leads more people to become worse and worse on economics and think that more and more intervention in the economy is the solution.
It's almost like they're framing it like, there's no sort of classic Democrat anymore. It's like you're either Hillary or you're a total socialist, and it seems like that this is being done on purpose to push people towards socialism.
Well, but it's no. Well, that's true in a sense, but what it really is it's just absolutely the failure of the American establishment. And in fact, in a way, we're lucky that we have the Bush and Clinton dynasties of the last 30 years, because that just makes the whole thing so identifiable. Like you're these two families.
Wow,
right?
you're like, look on the bright side. Yeah, that is a good positive.
Like it makes your enemy very clear. That's the bright side of it. Is look at the Republic. Who are the Bushes? The Bushes are liberal Republicans, right? This W. Bush wasn't Ronald Reagan's boy. He was H.W. Bush's boy, right? He was a Rockefeller Republican, a rhino, they call him. A liberal. W. Bush ran as a compassionate conservative. Passed, all of Ted Kennedy's welfare programs in the Senate and all of this kind of stuff, right? And then the Clintons, who are they? They're right-wing Democrats, right? They're corporatist, military industrial complex Democrats. And then you look at their stewards, right? Like their handmaidens are people like John McCain and Joe Biden, are the people who were their centrist allies in the Senate, who represent, those kind of brand names, represent exactly the consensus of the American establishment from the fall of the Soviet Union. Never mind before that, but let's just say from the beginning of the 1990s for the 30 years through where we're living right now. And what do? They ruined everything. They busted the economy 3 times now, which Trump played his role in that too. Shouldn't let him off the hook. But yeah, sure, he was president last year when they were doing a lot of this inflating and when they were doing a lot of the locking down for that matter too. And sent very mixed signals on all of it at all times. But no, truly it's their fault. Truly it is the establishment. And Dave Smith was on the Kennedy show today, and he said, Biden does represent sort of a last gasp of the establishment, that people were saying, Trump was so chaotic. Okay, fine, we'll go back to the Clintonioids, but it doesn't. It's in no way a ratification of their power. It's in no way represents, a true belief that these are responsible factions who've been in charge of our country. They killed a couple of million people in their wars, now from Nigeria to the Philippines, but of course, mostly in the Middle East, in Afghanistan and in Syria, and today through this day in Yemen. And nobody stands by these wars anymore at all. I met another anti-war veteran today. Certainly no one in the political establishment will stand up for him. Even William Crystal, in his debate with me 1 month ago, said, yeah, I guess probably Iraq was a mistake. And, even Bill Crystal himself refused to stand by Iraq War II at this point. So that's why people hate him. I mean, that's what people are so upset about, is here we live in the most prosperous society in the world, and yet somehow everybody's terrified that their situation can't hold. And that things are okay today, but where am I going to be in a year? And there's just no way in the world it should be this way. And the real unfortunate part of it is, as I was saying, is only the Austrian school get this right. And everybody else, they get it wrong. And if you listen to the consensus of, for example, the way they treated the crash of 2008, what causes crashes is, one day everything is going fine, and then the next day things go really wrong. So now we have to stimulate them back up to really fine, to where everything was before, right? When what was before was a giant bubble. What was before was an artificial period of prosperity. That was why it crashed. And as long as they refuse to accept that and accept their responsibility, as long as the people at large fail to understand that it's central government intervention in the monetary system in the way that they have it set up, then we're just going to continue to suffer through this. And the whole world's in the same situation too. I mean, every government in the world knows how to do nothing but print money all day. It's
What
really
would a non-intervention even look like? Have we ever had this before in American history? Like, I assume we had this prior to the Roaring 20s. I mean, it just
yeah. So,
seems.
well, I mean, it's a big, complicated mess, and I'm not a really great monetary historian of the 19th century. But no. I mean, it's not a bad question. I mean, it's a really great question, and definitely the place to go. I'm afraid to say is not my own institute, the Libertarian Institute. We're great, but the best place to go for this is Mises.org, Mises. That's named after Ludwig von Mises, the Austrian economist.
Ooh.
And these are the guys who really have all of this worked out. And there are all kinds of debates, even within the Austrian school, about free banking and whether we should have 100% gold standard, or whether we should let, different banks create different currencies, or how all of that would work. And there's a lot of different arguments about it. And the simplest answer would be that, on all other things being equal, where we're not talking about anarcho-capitalism, but we're just talking about the USA under this constitution, that you would just have 100% gold standard. And banks and the government both and all are forbidden from inflating the money supply. And I'm really
That's
not the very best
interesting.
on that, but I can tell
No,
you where
you're
to go.
great.
In fact,
You're doing great.
I'll tell you what, the very best thing to read. You want to read one easy thing about this. You
Yes.
can find this online.
Okay.
It's Rothbard,
Oh, yeah.
Rothbard, Murray Rothbard. And it's his Libertarian Manifesto. It's a primer on libertarianism. And I think it's chapter 11
Is it called The
is
State?
central banking. And it's just one short chapter of an introduction on central banking and how that works. And by the way, chapter 14 on foreign policy is also really, really great. But I think I'm almost certain it's chapter 11 that I was paraphrasing, even when I say, they try to prick the bubble slightly and let the air out just a little bit, but it doesn't work. It always pops, it always breaks and leads to this giant crash. It's inevitable and all that. That's a really great place to start. And then for other of your viewers who are interested, he also wrote, and you can find all this online for free, what has government done to our money and the case against the Fed.
Ooh.
And then there's a lot more to go from there, but that's the very best place to start. There is Murray Rothbard. That's his like easiest to access tracts on monetary policy. What has government done to our money? What has government done to our money and the case against the Fed? And then I think it's chapter 11 of the Libertarian Manifesto.
Okay. awesome. These sound
Mhm.
like really great resources.
Absolutely.
I'm definitely not an expert, but I feel like the more of these conversations I listen to, and like even, the more people I listen to, it just seems like, okay, our money's getting all fucked up. I guess I have to buy gold. I have to buy crypto. Oh, what crypto's not reliable. Oh, crypto's been infiltrated. So I feel like I represent like the average person. I feel like we get batted around on like, oh, you got to diversify your money, but then I just feel like I don't know where to turn, and then I don't trust anybody, and then it's just it feels really frustrating and scary.
Yeah. Hey, look, I mean, you said it all right there. Why in the world should you have to feel that way about a dollar bill? I mean, when they taught us how to count by, halves and quarters in first grade with the money, it didn't have all this fear built into it
Yeah, I
about
was
what might
rolling
happen,
coins in my
and yeah,
parents'
all the,
house. Good
yeah, this
times.
is supposed to be, yeah, it's got George Washington right on there. You're supposed to be able to trust it. And instead, just like everything in America, it's corrupt and it's rigged. It benefits the people who already have the most power and wealth at the expense of everybody else.
Is the goal of this to just, like, totally screw over the poor and the middle class? Like, is that their
No, well, no, I mean, the goal is just to steal and have the most. But if it hurts other people, then those are the breaks. You know what I mean? I mean, I
right.
think a major reason for it is so that they can maintain a world empire and then say, hey, look, no, we cut your taxes. We didn't raise your taxes. That's just, yeah, they did. They just counterfeited the money and devalued the money in your pocket, which is the same thing. It's a hidden tax. And in fact, I saw
Hmm.
a clip of Ron Paul today on Twitter, Rudy Haverstein III, which is a pseudonym, I think, of an old central banker. He tweeted a clip of Ron Paul making Ben Bernanke admit that back in 2008. That
Ooh.
isn't inflation, a hidden tax on the people. And Bernanke says, yes, it is. And it's unfair and it's too high right now. And in fact, by the way, so what was going on there? He was raising interest rates because he agreed with Ron Paul that this inflation is getting too high. And then what happened? There was a giant crash came 6 weeks later. I mean, he had to do it, but that was the result of having interest rates artificially low and creating all that money in the first place.
Right, because like, when you're buying a house, it's good when the interest rates are low because that means, like, whatever mortgage that you get to help you pay for it will be, I don't know, more reasonable, but then the prices of the houses go up to, like, compensate because, like, when you're looking for a house, it's, like, usually, like, one way or the other. Like, if the
Yeah,
interest rates are high,
you're
the
gonna pay
prices
either
will
way,
be
that's for
lower.
sure. Yeah.
What are some things that, like, the average person can look out for? Like you said before, like, "Oh, if this is going on, get ready because the bubble's
Yeah.
gonna pop."
Oh, okay. That's a great question. I'll tell you a story too. It'll help you remember. I know a guy who's in construction. He's a skateboarder friend of mine. And in the Bush years, his job, and this was a huge thing. I guess this is still going on, really. But it became a huge thing in the early 2000s um, because of the excess property tax money that was coming in from the housing bubble at that time. There's all this property tax revenue was coming in. So the cities and the counties were building giant concrete skate parks. And my guy had a skate park building company. He would go make deals with city councils and they would pay him, and he's carving these giant concrete scars into these states that last for 100 years. Like, what a legacy, man. I'm proud of him.
Huh.
But anyway, um, but he told me the story, and it was funny because when he told me the story, he didn't know that I'm, Federal Reserve boy and all of this stuff. I'm just a skater guy that he knows from a long time ago. Um, and so I don't know how we got on the subject, but we were talking about it, and he started explaining to me about the Fed and the boom and bust cycle and all this. So I'm just listening. And he told me the story of how he would always read the Wall Street Journal every morning. And as soon as they said that they were raising the federal funds rate, that is the rate, the federal government, the Federal Reserve Board dictates the price or the interest rate on money that banks loan to each other overnight. And that's one of the ways that they control the price of money is by that federal funds rate. And so when he saw that they started raising the federal funds rate, he told me he sold all of his equipment. See, this is a big company, right? He's not like hammers and skill saws. He's got tractors and stuff. He's building giant concrete skate parks. He's got to dig into the earth. And these are huge projects, $1 million
Wow.
projects or more, right? So he sold all his stuff. all his backhoes and all his bulldozers and all his dump trucks and all of his stuff. And he sat back and waited for the whole thing to crash. And then he got right back in it again because he understood that this is what's going on. They're holding the interest rate artificially low. But once they start to panic and start to raise that rate, then the crash is coming due. And he knew it was coming soon. So what was he going to do? Be stuck with all these debts and owning all this equipment, even though he knows he's not going to be able to get back to work again for another 2 years, another year and a half or 2 years.
And then where are you going to store, right? You have to store that stuff somewhere.
Right. So that's, a regular guy running a regular business out in the world who knows about Austrian school theory, about how this works, and does the simple job for his own self-protection of reading those numbers in the Wall Street Journal every morning and seeing what the Federal Reserve is doing and knowing that once, and you know what, like, I can't help but think that it had to have been that it was a little Ron Paul on Ben Bernanke's shoulder saying this inflation's getting out of control, this housing bubble, it ain't going to last. How long do you think this is going to last? I wish there was an archive somewhere of just every time Ron Paul grilled Ben Bernanke and Alan Greenspan before him about, boy, you build up a big bubble in housing, it's going to have to pop someday, don't you think, Mr. Greenspan? I mean, he was at this for years. He said that there was going to be a crash in the year 2000. There's going to be a crash in the housing market. It came 8 years later. But it was the very same bubble he was talking about. And he didn't say, by the way, it was going to come very soon. He was saying, you're setting up a bubble that will result in a crash. And called it perfectly because he understands this stuff. He's an Austrian school economist, Dr. Paul is.
How am I just hearing about this Austrian school now? I don't know. I just feel like
they're the best. It's so it's a secret.
They figured it out. When you say we were due for a bubble, I mean, it feels like we just had a crash. Like it just feels like we're just coming back from the last one. What makes you say we were due?
Well, because it had been since 08, it had been 12 years. And, Donald Trump, I think, correctly ran against the bubble. He was saying, this is an Obama bubble. They've held interest rates artificially low. He's a real estate tycoon. He knew a little bit about this. Right. I doubt he ever read Mises, but he knew a little bit about this stuff. And so he would say, this is just a big bubble and Obama shouldn't be allowed to take credit for it and all this. And once he was in office, he goes, oh, the economy's doing great. And it's all because of me. And I get taking credit. But then he's riding that wave. And you could see him, like you could see the gears turn in his head, fingers crossed, praying that he can make it across the election finish line for re-election before the crash comes. And it was going to be a race because it was going to have to come due anyway. And to tell you the honest truth, I don't know exactly what the Federal Reserve was doing with their rates, say or what they would have done spring last year. But what happened instead was the COVID broke out. And so once they had the lockdowns, and it was so obviously political at the time too, that the Democrats are the ones who the Democratic governors are the ones who want to hold the lockdowns the longest, make the people suffer the most, because they know that it'll all redound against him. He's the leader of the country, even though they're the ones really putting their people through the trauma of having all their businesses closed and all that stuff.
They don't care about their people.
It did work. Yeah. So in other words, that was one way to force the recession, to make sure that there was a recession before the election, but it could have come due at any time. It could have come due, it might have been due, it might have happened right now in an alternate timeline with no COVID or lockdown. It would have been due sometime around here anyway, because you can only get away with the fraud for so long before prices start getting out of control. And then, so this is what happened again. Then here's the thing too. Okay. They forced the crash last year. That's just like the crash that happened in 08, right? Or not exactly like it, but that's like the parallel, right? But then, so that means that right now is the parallel to 2009 or 10, where they're just pumping a ton of money into the economy to try to stimulate it and try to get it to boom back again. So now the question is, how long do we have before reality comes due again? And especially because this time the lockdowns were so severe that the amount of inflation that they caused to try to make up for it was incredible. And there are some reports that said it was like 2/3 of all the American dollars ever created were created last year.
What? Oh
And
my
and
God.
so I asked a real expert economist from Mises, Ryan McMacken, on my show the other day about that, and he said, "Well, it depends on how you measure it exactly, but that it's not unreasonable to say that this is the largest increase of the money supply in the shortest amount of time that's ever been tried by, certainly by the United States."
And
And
it's
so, what
just
does
to
that?
make up for the lockdowns, to make, I don't know,
Yeah,
to make what? To make Biden look like he's crushing it, basically?
that's part of it, absolutely. And just yeah, to keep everything from completely falling apart. um, to try to stave off the worst level of the crash, right? The bubble's this high, the crash has got to be that low. But if they can inflate enough, they make sure the crash doesn't get that low. We get back on another bubble again, right? So we don't see the depth of the depression that we really have coming. And so, but then if this is this massive increase compared to the last one, if, in other words, if the Trump Biden quantitative easing here makes the Obama Biden uh, quantitative easing of 10 years ago pale in comparison, then how long till the crash, and how bad is it going to be? I mean, I really don't know, but it seems like maybe, the boom is higher and the crash will be lower, and it might come sooner than later. Like, for example, the Austin housing market. Are we going to continue to have this kind of price inflation in the housing market, where a $300,000 house in another couple of years is worth $600,000?
Yeah, New York
At
too.
some
Like
point, that's going to fall apart.
the
That
prices are
can't last.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. But don't let them blame capitalism for it, other than in the very, well, see, you know what? I should give the commies their due here. There's a different way. Okay, a libertarian's definition of capitalism is property rights and free exchange, right? Voluntary exchange on contract. That's what a libertarian means by capitalism, right? But there is a sense in which capitalism means a system of state power where those who hold the capital rule the state, right? Which
Right.
is just another nice way of saying, like, lowercase f fascism, really, right? As
Yeah.
Robert Higgs calls it, a participatory fascism, right? We're like, yeah, you can run for office, but it doesn't really make a difference. And so and it's not true that we have a system where those who hold the capital make all of the rules, but they do have a far disproportionate amount of power, considering their access to the national government that the rest of us just cannot match. And
Yeah.
so, in that sense, and that can be a real problem when we're using different definitions of the same term and arguing past each other, you know. But it would, as a libertarian, my argument clearly is it's the government intervention in the system that would otherwise just be private individuals interacting with each other and charging whatever price the market will bear, and that kind of natural order is sustainable and works well for the most people, and all of
Right.
the time. That it's the distortions caused by the intervention in the marketplace. Somebody compared, this is somebody said, what if you had like the circuses in town, and then so the local diner is just slammed for 2 weeks, and then the owner goes, oh man, we're gonna have to expand and add a whole other back
Right.
room to
And
our
it's like,
diner, right?
no, it's just the circus.
Yeah, it's just the circuses in town, right? It's a temporary boom, but then
Mhm.
people make really bad choices based on the idea that this is the new scheme of things. They can't see the future, and or they can't see in the zoomed out kind of larger picture of
Like if you
the
win the
nature of the
lottery
distortion.
and then
Yeah,
you like live large and you
right,
don't
and
like
make bad
budget
bets.
and make
Yeah, exactly.
savings, yeah, or
Right.
invest.
Yep. So I remember when I was a little kid, one of my mom's friends, she bought houses and renovated them, fixed them up, and flipped them
She was
and
a
sold them again.
flipper.
Yep. And I remember this is in the late 1980s. There was a massive real estate crash here in Texas. And I remember my mom's friend got stuck holding the bag. She owned like 5 houses and she couldn't
Oof.
get rid of them. And it stuck for years too. It was really bad. It was a buyer's market in Austin for like 10 years after that or something. And
Wow.
and that was actually probably like, pretty influential on me. I've seen the result of the boom and the bust myself with people I knew when I was just a little kid. that's how it works. It was this artificial. In fact, they inflated for Vietnam, and that led for the crash of '68. Then they tried to inflate all through the 70s to spur the economy, which didn't really spur the economy. It just led to what they called stagflation. No boom, but lots of inflation anyway. And then they deliberately caused a crash at the end of the 70s and into the 1980s when Paul Volcker was the chairman of the Fed. He raised interest rates way, way up in order to crush the inflation, which was a good thing in the larger sense. And then that helped destroy Jimmy Carter's presidency, of course, and lead to the rise of Ronald Reagan. But he kept that policy through like 1982, beginning of 83. But then once inflation was beat, bam, they started inflating again. Volcker was gone. The new guy came in. I forgot his name. I don't think it was Greenspan yet. Maybe it was Greenspan then. I think there was a guy in between Volcker and Greenspan. But anyway, they just started inflating again. And that led to the crash of '88. And that was the one that got my mom's friend owning all these houses that she couldn't get rid of.
What did she do with her houses?
I have no idea. I was just a stupid little kid, but I remember that part of it. But so, yeah, that's the way it goes. And as you know, I'm mostly an anti-war guy, but I spent a lot of time looking at the news, and I know that in 2009 and 10, I don't know who all is counting. There must be foundations out there that count. I know the Federal Reserve keeps their own statistics of suicides and foreclosures and bankruptcies and foster care and orphans and all these things. They keep the stats because they know the kind of pain they're causing. In fact, there's this book by a guy named William Greider, who was a Washington Post guy. He wrote like a Democrats version of of the Federal Reserve thing. It's against them, but from a Democrat's point of view. It's called The Secrets of the Temple.
Okay.
And in there, he talks about how during the Volcker years, when they were raising interest rates high to stop the inflation and causing the recession, which either way, it's bad. I mean, it's their intervention either way, making up for the last one. But how at the Fed, not only do they keep all those statistics of bankruptcies and foreclosures and suicides and all those things, but then they measure their virtue in their willingness to continue what they know needs to be done, no matter how bad it's hurting the very weakest people on the margin.
Yikes.
You know?
So
and this is how they know that they're doing the right thing as a good public servant, is they won't let the carnage that they inflict affect their emotional mindset for them to make the scientific decisions that they assign themselves to make over our interest rates and currency. It's really bananas. It's the kind of thing that if I was telling you, see, this is how it was in fascist Italy, you'd be like, oh, that's really bad.
Yeah, that sounds horrible.
You know what I mean?
Wow.
That's how it is in our country right now,
No, this is present day. So these crashes are not just like random. It's like they're totally calculated.
I'm afraid so. Well, the boom is calculated. The bust is inevitable. That's the thing. The boom is, if you can get away with inflating the currency, you do it. That's basically seems to be the thinking there.
I have to get to a couple of these super chats. My gosh, you're a wealth of information. I'm loving it, Scott. From BMB Studios. Oh yes, Patriarchy Supply or Patriot Supply. That's funny. Another super chat says, "Let's do this." Sir, did you hear a who? Is that an inside joke?
I heard a coup or two.
From Lucius Cole, Scott has a better beard than Chrissie. Yes, he does. I should not have shaved mine. BMB again. Remember who died on the Titanic monetary style? Right? Didn't they? There's a theory that the Titanic was purposely sunk because of all the important people who were on it.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I know that it was. I believe William Astor is the center of that. Who was from a powerful family. Whether he was really opposed to what Morgan was doing at that time or that kind of thing, I really don't know enough about that. But I do know that. I guess I do know that the Lusitanias, that company was in direct competition with Morgan's company. But
interesting.
I'd have to know a lot more about it than that.
Sounds like we'll have to watch the Titanic movie again.
I bet it's in there.
DJ Codgel. Chrissy, you should have Ryan Dawson on to explain all of the crony capitalism that went on in the latter half of the 1800s. Oh, yeah, he's on my to-do list. I'd love
That's a
to
good
have
idea.
him on. From Slosher, Murray Rothbard has a short book called The Fix Was On that explains banking history in the U.S. You can get it on Audible. It's about 90 minutes. I love that. Just a quick
Great.
summer read.
Yep. Hey, listen, any subject in the world that you're interested in, add Rothbard to your search terms. I'm
Okay.
telling you what, man.
Ooh, okay. Even porn? No, just
Word
kidding.
to the wise. No, not that.
So what would a bust like right now look like? The same as the
Oh,
others?
it would look like probably last time what happened was the stocks crashed, the housing market crashed, and at that time, many really important banks were way over leveraged on their holding of all that bad mortgage debt. And so Lehman Brothers ceased to exist. Bear Stearns ceased to exist.
Right.
AIG and Goldman and all of Citigroup had to, all and Bank of America and Wells Fargo, all of them had to be bailed out with billions of dollars,
So
tens,
does
hundreds
that
of
mean
millions of
any
dollars.
banks who are like, let's say like the bank owns a house and the more, I guess, houses they own, the worse position they're in
Yeah, well,
when this
especially it
happens?
depends on it depends on who they're selling to, but it also depends on the overall economy. And the thinking at that time was that there have been bubbles in real estate in certain states and certain times, but we've never had a national real estate bubble. Therefore, it's impossible. Like nuclear war, just don't worry about it. It'll never happen, and it'll go.
Yeah.
Just don't think about it, and it won't be a problem. And then, but it wasn't true, right? They had inflated massive housing bubbles all across the country, with deliberate government policy, loose monetary policy, and then plus congressional fiscal policy and the laws that they passed to deliberately direct money in to making loans to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to get them. And so that essentially was all welfare for Wall Street is what it was, because all those poor people who couldn't have afforded a house, they didn't get to keep the house. It was Wall
Right.
Street that got away with it. And then when I want to be careful, revise my statement a moment ago, they had to be bailed out or else they would have ceased to exist, which would have been fine with me. I'm not saying, I'm certainly not saying I think they had to be bailed out. I'm just saying to prevent them from ceasing to exist, they all had to be bailed out by the Federal Reserve and the Congress. And it's just a massive ripoff. And to think that this just happens over and over and again. In the 1990s, in the period before the dot-com bubble, in the Bill Clinton years, people would say, oh, you libertarians, you're crazy. You want to deregulate the economy and deregulate banking. Well, what about the S&L crisis? Don't you remember the giant S&L crisis? That was the housing bubble I was talking about.
Oh,
That
for me,
my
the
mom's
SNL
friend got
crisis
in.
is how it hasn't
Yeah,
been funny in decades.
yeah. So,
SNL. Okay.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of
That
it.
was a
I was
joke.
talking.
You said SNL crisis, and then I was trying to
Oh,
make a joke,
oh
but
no.
I
Oh, and
wasn't
you're
worth
so
it.
right about that. And I wish I had heard you right the first time. The other part of that joke is my wife's name is Larissa, so we're the SNL crisis.
Oh,
That
that's
works too.
cute.
Yeah.
That is cute.
Sometimes it's terrible. No, I'm just kidding. Um,
Are you
and
a relative
yeah,
at all of the Tim Horton Canadian coffee fame?
no,
No relation?
no.
Okay.
That'd be nice if I got the free coffee
Yeah, it would be.
somehow. I
Get
could
those
work out a promotion.
coffee
I sure drink
dollars.
enough. But yeah, so the people say, well, we can't deregulate. You want deregulation, but deregulation caused the crash. But it's like, well, they kept the regulations to say you had to bail them out, right? Get rid of those regulations first. No bailouts. Then get rid of the other
Just
regulations
let
and
people fail
let
or
them
let the
take
banks
their risk.
fail.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's right. As soon as Citigroup ceases to exist, the sooner I'm happier. So let's do
It's
that.
gonna be
Whatever
Scott
causes.
Group. Yeah.
Yeah, and Goldman Sachs. I mean, these guys are horrible. The amount of suffering they put people through, screw them. The worst happens to them. As long as it's the market doing it to them, then let
Yeah.
them take their risks. Right? Like on airplane, they bought their tickets. They knew the gamble they were taking. I say, let them crash. That's me. Exactly. Right there.
Right. So a lot of times folks will criticize libertarians for like, I don't know, all sorts of things like from oh, you got that, you're the party with that one guy with a boot on his head, or libertarians don't deal in reality, or libertarians just like have their heads in the clouds. what do you think is the biggest problem? I guess getting more folks on board with libertarianism, is it like, I don't know, the marketing or the outreach, or like just educating folks on the fact that there is another option, or is it, I don't know, is it possibly maybe just trying to meet there is no meeting in the middle, though. There is no like compromise to kind of like get more people on board. I just feel like a lot of people are very intimidated by libertarian ideas, and they're quick to say like, oh, well, that's not possible, or oh, like you have to deal in reality. Like, I'm sure you've heard a lot of these sort of
Well,
vague criticisms.
yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, people aren't very familiar with what libertarianism is. And there's a risk, there's a chance whatever they have heard about it, they heard it from a not very good source. So, I mean, if you look at the Ron Paulians from 2008 and 2012, I mean, this is an entire generation of libertarians who absolutely do have their act together because they, learn from the right sources in the first place. So it's true too that, and I think people on the outside don't really know this, but for the most part, the libertarian movement has stayed clear of the Libertarian Party, and they have really operated as entirely separate kind of things. And that is now coming to an end. There now is a movement of Ron Paulians, especially led by, and not exclusively, but especially led by what's called the Mises Caucus, of people who are trying to get in the Libertarian Party and make it represent what libertarians are really about. And like, for example, the libertarian movement, and not just antiwar.com, but much of the libertarian movement has been really great on the wars for the last 20 years, where the Libertarian Party has basically been AWOL on it. And that's just one example. So I think there are a lot of people now who are working very hard. They want a Libertarian Party that'll make us proud and represent what we're talking about. And as far as the guy with the boot on his head, like I'll address that. I know a guy who knows him from a long time ago.
Berman
From the
Supreme. I've had him on this
1990s.
podcast. Yeah, he's an
And I don't
interesting
know
guy.
the guy. I don't know the guy, but I know a guy who knows him from the 1990s. And his whole act with the stupid boot and everything was he was making fun of the Democrats. He would run for office as a Democrat, and then he would get up there next to the other Democrats and say, I'm going to give everybody a pony, and I'm going to give everybody a toothbrush, and I'm going to be your mommy and your daddy and take good care of you, because he was mocking the stupid, horrible Democrats next to him. Not that funny, but like, okay, like that's a good shtick, I guess. I could settle for that. I don't know. But then he brings the same idiocy to the Libertarian Party, and he doesn't seem to recognize that nobody thinks he's mocking the Democrats anymore.
Right.
Now it's us that he's mocking. Now it's the people that he's standing next to. And I don't know.
That's a good point.
I think he didn't understand. I don't know much about the guy, but I think he did not understand how that looks. And I said before too that, if he wore a big red mohawk, well, we would know what that means. That's punk rock. And that stands for X, Y, and Z. And we get that. But nobody knows what a boot means. It's not like it says something on it, right, some obvious slogan or something. It's not obvious what it means at all. I think it means the obvious interpretation is whoever I'm standing next to is also an idiot, which again is fine for when you're, essentially.
Yeah, it's like an I'm with stupid shirt.
Yeah. So go ahead and troll the Democrats that way, and don't do us like that. And I think it's really unfortunate because that's the kind of thing that sticks in people's mind. And but I think we're gonna have a really strong candidate in 2024. Is gonna make us all proud. And is going to help move the ball forward, and just like in the way that Ron Paul did, where there's nothing to regret about that. That came off just about as well as it could have, short of him actually becoming the president.
Are you talking about Dave?
Yeah, I'm talking about Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah,
wow, that's very exciting.
I'm telling you what, it is exciting. And I saw him on Kennedy tonight, and you can just see it's like he's a pile of dynamite just sitting there, not lit even, but just sitting there. Oh, well, sure, Kennedy, this and that. But you could just see the potential for like the real persuasion to come out when it's time.
That's exciting.
It's going to be something else, man. It's going to be really great.
How is he looking for people to like join his team? Like, what kind of support does Dave need right
Well, it's
now?
a bit early for all that, right?
Yeah.
We're still, 2 years away from really time to start anything. So we'll see how it
Yeah.
goes. But yeah, I think it's pretty clear he's going to run. I sure hope he's going to run. And I know that if he does run, that it's going to be incredible.
Okay. Wow. That's very exciting.
Absolutely.
I want to share your antiwar.com. Wow. I mean, this is a lot of information here. And you wrote a book about Afghanistan, but obviously before the whole mess of Biden pulling out the troops.
Right. Yeah, it came out Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan came out 4 years ago.
I mean, what do you think of everything, of how it was done?
Well,
Just
I
a
mean, I have to tell
disaster.
you, the entire war is a catastrophe. Every last bit of it. And so it was impossible that we're going to leave well. People make such a scandal about the way that the end of the war was, but that's nothing compared to the way the war was. And, the fact that it even ended with a suicide bombing of 18-year-old Marines, and then a drone attack against an innocent family that had nothing to do with anything as the reprisal is, I'm sorry, but just perfect in terms of, I'm not saying I like it, but I'm saying that is the microcosm of the whole war. The tragedy of the entire Afghan war is just, the whole thing should have never been this way at all. And so it was like the the perfect epitaph for the thing, for like, of course that's how it ends. Of course that's how it ends. A suicide attack against kids who weren't even born when 9/11 happened. And then a drone attack, a robot, droid strike against 7 children and 3 adults from 2 families.
That's
Just
horrible.
completely obliterated 2 families' lives. I mean, imagine they're survivors. They're worse off than the dead. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's just how it goes. And I mean, I'm not sure how much time we got, but basically what he could have done better was he could have stuck with Trump's deadline, which was May 1st.
And not drag it out for just
That's right.
9/11. Yeah.
And that would have given us a little bit of what they called in Vietnam the decent interval. Let us get the hell out and let the enemy take the capital city in a little while instead of while we're still here. And so instead, that turned into this debacle because he kicked the can down the road 4 months there. And that's definitely on him. But, the real crisis in the withdrawal was that they left all that equipment for the Afghan National Army, which completely
What were they thinking?
evaporated.
Like, why
Yeah,
wouldn't
and
you
then the
just blow
Taliban
up the
got it all.
equipment or something?
Right. Well, so that was the thing, was if they had pulled all that equipment out or tried to destroy it all, well, they would have been blamed for undermining the army. But then they left it for the army, which was going to fall anyway. So, but then, and in fact, they did send in B-52s and try to bomb a bunch of the trucks and tanks and howitzers and all the rest of the stuff that they had left behind. They did go back and bomb their own bases and equipment. The other thing was they had all these civilians in Kabul, a couple of miles from the airport. And how are they supposed to get them out? They had to rely on the Taliban for security to get them out of the country, which was, as they say in DC, embarrassing, right? Not like anybody could ever be held accountable for anything, but it makes them look bad that they kind of were in this scramble to get out of town. And at the start of the scramble, the president of the country got on a helicopter and fled with a stolen couple of $100 million as the entire government fell apart. So now what they could have done was they could have said, listen, the government we built in the capital city here is a complete joke. It's a Potemkin village and a farce, and it cannot stand. It's a house of cards. And so we're going to go ahead and pull out now and make sure and keep our people safe. Well, if they had done that, then they would have been blamed for undermining that government and being the cause of its fall, right? Which they should have done that anyway, because that was the truth. And there's no way they should have. And instead, what they did the opposite of that. Biden said, we built a 300,000 man army and we built a parliamentary democracy. And it's time for them to stand on their own. And they can stand on their own. 300,000 man army, Taliban can't beat them. We have, plenty of time. We should have plenty of time to get out of here. But that just wasn't true. So in that sense, you can criticize them for that. But really, it kind of obscures and unfairly really obscures the major point, which is he ended the damn war. And I'm not certain that Donald Trump would have stuck with his own deadline for May 1st. Donald Trump's a notorious pushover when it comes on withdrawals from wars that we're in, that even when he really wants out. I mean, he ordered troops out of Afghanistan 3 different times. He ordered troops out of Somalia at least once. He ordered the troops out of Syria twice and was overridden by his own Pentagon every time, and then rolled over himself. Like, he didn't go to the mat over it. He rolled over and let them win over and over again. So if they had come to him the way they came to Biden and said, you can't leave now, boss, and gave him the 3rd degree, he might have given in. I'll give credit, and maybe not. And it was, he did have the political will to make a deal with Khalilzad, to make the deal with the Taliban to withdraw, which was huge. I mean, I give him a lot of credit even for making that deal, but Biden deserves credit for finally ending that war. It's the best thing he's ever done in his entire sorry life. And the guy is an absolutely despicable person. If you read this one over my, this shoulder,
enough already.
Yeah. Joe Biden is in there over and over and over again throughout the last 40 years, being, and he plays bit parts, but he's when he's a supporting role, it's always something horrible his entire career long. And this is the one thing he finally did right, was say enough of this. And by the way, I'll tell you why that is too. It's because his good son, who was not a crackhead, but was like the Attorney General of Virginia or whatever it was, or maybe it was of Delaware. He was the good son. He died of brain cancer that he almost certainly got because he was stationed near the Mosul Dam in Iraq and getting poison breathing in the smoke from the burn pits there.
Oh my
And this is
God, I
something
didn't
that's
even
affected
think
a
of
lot
that.
of veterans. Yeah. So he didn't die in the war. He didn't get blown up by a landmine. He didn't get, he didn't get shot. So I'm not saying he died in the war, but he did die of the war. And he knows that he died. Biden, the father, knows that his son died because of a war that he started. I mean, he was, when W. Bush and Dick Cheney were trying to get us into that war, Joe Biden was the leader of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate, and the Democrats held the Senate. He was the leader of the opposition party's foreign policy division in the upper house. He could have stopped that war. And instead, he made a deal with Bush that I'm with you all the way. Let's do this, and did everything he could to push the resolution through. He only held 2 days of hearings, and he wouldn't let any good guys testify at all. It was only hawks who were allowed to testify in, the late summer of, I guess, September of 2002. And so he, I think, as bad as any politician is, Biden is as bad as any of them. He's as vacuous and just as horrible as any of them. The senator from MasterCard is what he's called because of how corrupt he is and always has been.
Do you honestly think he is has enough?
He killed his own son. He killed his own son. So even Dick Cheney would feel bad if he killed his own son. You know what I mean? And I just think that that's the kind of thing that he can't escape. And so you'll hear him say over and over again, and this is in the reports, and sometimes he says it out loud, that look, my son died because of the war, and would I give somebody else's son to fight to keep the Taliban out of Kabul? Nah. He just didn't believe in it. And I think it really did come down to his personal emotional opinion about this. That is it really fair to send people to war just to keep the Taliban from taking over the country when they are the most powerful faction? They're the only ones ready to rule it. Never mind fit to rule it in any sense of your moral judgment of whether they're good men or not. There's no one capable of ruling the country, and they're coming. And how many more Marines and Army soldiers are we going to throw in front of these men and as Biden said, if we did this in 10 years, and I say this in my book from 4 years ago, if we leave in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, it's going to be the same. The government we propped up in power will fall without our support. Its army will dissolve without our support. And the Taliban will take over the country again. So why would we continue to bleed like this and prolong it? And frankly, again, I do nothing but criticize this guy's entire career. And he is responsible for both of these wars in a very large sense. But he's got to be given credit at least for ending this one. And then what would be nice is if we could keep that momentum up and say, when you ended the Afghan war, we really liked that. Do it again. Instead of shame on you for not withdrawing well, it should be get us the hell out of Somalia and stop supporting Saudi Arabia and UAE's war in Yemen and get our troops out. Our troops are occupying oil and wheat fields in eastern Syria where they're not invited invaders. We got no business there. Islamic Caliphate is gone. And Bashar al-Assad is their greatest enemy, the ruler of Syria. If we just get the hell out of his way, that job would be finished. And there's no reason in the world to be there. In Iraq, we fought for factions that hate our guts and want us out. We've won 2 wars for them. We could cut and run from there just fine right now. It wouldn't change a thing on the ground there, except we wouldn't have our guys in harm's way anymore.
What would it like? I don't know. Why would we get involved in the first place? Like what? It just feels like we're kind of just like butting in.
Money in Israel.
Hmm.
I mean, that's why we fought Iraq War II, was for Israel. It wasn't because they supported Al-Qaeda. It was because they supported Hamas, which is not a threat to the United States. But Saddam Hussein would pay the families of anybody who died in conflict with Israel, and that included Hamas suicide bombers. Their families would get money, which was a roundabout way of paying for those attacks to happen in the
Wow.
Second
Okay.
Intifada. And so, but if George W. Bush and Richard Pearl and Paul Wolfowitz had told the American people that you are going to war in Iraq because Saddam Hussein pays the families of Hamas suicide bombers, that would have not flown. So instead, they said Saddam is going to give a nuclear bomb to Osama bin Laden to kill you with if we don't stop him. And that was a damn lie, and they knew it was a damn lie when they told it. But that was why they did it. And I should say, too, they stupidly believed, this is the neoconservatives, Israel's fifth column in the United States, believed that if they got rid of Saddam Hussein, that would empower Jordan to rule Iraq. And that would weaken Iran's alliance with Syria and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, I know that's complicated. And in fact, it's completely stupid and wrong. And what happened instead was Jordan has no influence in Iraq whatsoever. It's Iran's best friends that rule Iraq. And so their entire plan, it was called the clean break plan. The neoconservatives' entire plan for the Iraq war, that it would weaken Iran's alliance with Hezbollah in Lebanon, completely failed and backfired and did the exact opposite. And so that was why they did it. And no, they did not tell the American people that.
Damn, Scott is out here dropping truth bombs. I like this comment.
Sorry.
I like this comment from Central Scrutinizer. This is the type of libertarianism that has been sorely missing since the public face of the movement became the cult of Bitcoin. Thoughts on Bitcoin? Are you a Doge person? Are you into all of this stuff? I put a little bit in, and then I don't know. And then it kind of crashed after SNL and I got scared, but I don't know. I'm feeling like,
well, I don't know enough about it to really believe, but I do wish that I had started mining it when it was worth 0.000002 cents way back when I first became aware of it in 2009. I mean, I'm a libertarian radio host, so I knew about it all along. And so I do kick myself because I could have a gajillion dollars and have my own anti-military industrial complex and do whatever I want with it at this point. So I'm for it, and I'm for people finding ways to pay each other that gets around central authority, whether it's Bitcoin or any of those other ones. I don't know that it's the magical cure-all to everything. I don't believe in magical cure-alls to everything, but I can see the utility in it, and I do think that, as we were talking about before, every government in the world, every central bank in the world, they only know how to print money. That's all they know how to do, is inflate and inflate and inflate. And every once in a while they stop for a second and then they inflate again because they just don't know what else to do. And, when they stop, it causes a crash. So then they inflate some more. So the
it's
crash
like a
is
girl
so
who keeps
bad.
getting bigger and bigger
There it
implants,
goes.
and it's like,
So,
those are
yeah.
not right for your body.
Right. But so that means, right, that the demand for Bitcoin in Angola is going to only go up from here. The demand for Bitcoin in Bhutan and in Russia and in Lithuania and in everywhere, the sky's the limit, right? There's no reason for demand to fall off for this stuff. It's, there's 7.5 billion people in the world, and it's easy to adopt. It becomes easier and easier to figure out how to run a Bitcoin wallet and all of this kind of stuff, where little kids could do it. And, I don't know if adults can do it. Little kids can do it all around the world if they, have a computer and a couple of tries. So I think it's inevitable. I think when the Chinese try to ban it, I mean, I don't know what the
That's how you
black
know.
market in
Yeah.
Bitcoin looks like in China, but how can they possibly ban it? I don't think that can possibly work. It's, a wallet, and it's a seed phrase in somebody's mind,
Hmm.
And so I don't think that they can really do anything to stop it. So I wouldn't say I'm a member of the Bitcoin cult in any way, but I guess I kind of wish I had been all along. Maybe I
Ooh.
should become a Bitcoin cultist now.
It's never too late. Interesting question from Two Master. Did you have interactions with Alex Jones in Austin during the 90s? Were you really I saw some old footage of AJ from back when he was like kind of hot looking, like doing real on the ground journalism.
I knew him back then. I quit messing around with that stuff in about 1999, I think was the last time. But in the 1990s, he was good on Waco, good on Oklahoma City, good on cops killing unarmed black people, and did a lot of good radio back then. So
Okay.
that's probably all I should say about that.
Oh. From Spinals. You guys have these names I can't pronounce. You have some of the most interesting and insightful guests. Thank you. Look at that,
Thank
Scott.
you.
They
I
like
appreciate
you.
it. That's good.
Alex Jones is still very hot. True. Wow. My gosh. I thank you for all these recommendations. I am going to add these book details to the description of this episode. Also, before I forget, shout out to Cushy Dreams. If any of you guys are suffering from any kind of anxiety, I personally love Cushy Dreams. They specialize in smokable CBD, different strains, different indica sativa blends. So if you want to be a little bit more up or a little bit more relaxed before bed, go to cushydreams.com and use promo code CMP to get 20% off. Scott Horton, thank you so much for coming on. My gosh, I have to have you back.
Hey, read my books.
Yes, read his books. I'm going to put you in solo layout. Woo!
Yeah.
Fool's Errand and Enough Already.
Afghanistan and all of them.
I love it. Where can they buy these books directly from you, or should they go to
Yeah, you can go to libertarianinstitute.org, and in fact /books, I should have said. And in fact, it's our fund drive at the Institute right now too, and everybody can get books as kickbacks for their donations to our great fund drive, and we got matching funds and all that kind of stuff if people are into this kind of thing. Yeah, libertarianinstitute.org/books. If people don't like Amazon, for example, we have links to all the other different places where they're available and that kind of deal.
Sweet. Okay. Amazing. Scott, thank you so much for coming on the pod. Thank you, chat, for all your questions and comments. I'll definitely have you back, Scott. You're just a wealth of information. Thanks, guys. Until next time.